In this video, I want to talk about the novel Another World by Pat Barker and the themes that this novel centers around. Before we go into the novel, let me just say a few words about uh, the novel as a genre and the reading of literature, um, and what it does. When you read a novel, you experience a world, um, the world of the novel. It's a world with many characters, many different characters, many aspects, many facets of life, is what you see. Many locations, different atmospheres, different places in time as well. So, a good novel will give you an idea of life that seems in some way believable. Maybe it is very similar to reality, just even more crystal clear. Uh, the emotions, the feelings, the experiences that people have are in a novel presented uh, extra strongly. It can be like it seems even more real than real life. Um, so it can give a sense of life as it truly is, and sometimes the writer's imagination can invent things that would never happen in real life, but it's presented in a way so you believe it as a reader. You're carried away. Um, the many different people in a story and the many locations and atmospheres can create a multivariate perspective on existence of life, and and this is something a piece of literature does. It gives it can be ambiguous, it can be confusing to read, because life itself is like that. Life itself is something to be discovered, something to be figured out, and the same goes for literature. When you read a novel, it's like a search for the meaning in all these characters, in all these events. So what is the point of all this? Um, so as you read, you experience all this, and perhaps you compare yourself to some of these characters. So not only do you learn about life, but you can also learn about yourself through comparing yourself to certain characters. You may think, am I a Gareth? Am I a Miranda? Am I like Geordie? Um, and through reading, you you discover yourself as well through your reactions to the different characters. Um, but you also learn about the world outside yourself. You learn about other kinds of characters that are not like you. So reading is experiencing. It's seeing the world, and all these people are presented in sometimes in a vivid way that can seem more vivid than ordinary life. And I think that's the great thing about literature. Maybe the meaning, the point of literature is to experience life. You can sit in your room and you can experience life, and you can also learn lessons about life through reading. So that's one thing, life in many aspects, uh, and you comparing yourself to the main character, or the different characters. But the other thing is um, this point. So what is the message in all this? You get this big this painting with all these different elements, different characters, and then what is the unifying thing? What's the theme? And that's something that's there in a novel, and you go through the novel, and it progresses like a search for this meaning. It's like going through a city, going through a country, going through life, going through the world, and you're seeing so many different things, and you're trying to organize it all in your head and trying to find some meaning, some unifying idea. When we read postmodern literature, the idea of ambiguity means things not being clear. The idea of you not being told directly what's the point of all this, that's at the center. You can be confused, you can be presented with different ideas, and you read, and you have to, as a reader, you have to try to create some kind of meaning. That's a postmodern perspective. It's one that says truth is hard to find. Maybe there isn't any truth, or maybe there is truth, but who knows what is the truth actually? Maybe it's complicated. Maybe the truth can be complicated. There can be more than what you say may be true, but other people might have other stories that might be true as well. The idea of something being complicated is at the center. Now, the search for the center, search for the point, the search for this wisdom, this what can you learn from this story, that's the task of the reader. You have to read the novel, and then along the way you find out, so what is it I can learn? What can I learn from Gareth? Why is he this way? What about Geordie? What can we learn from this story and all the things that progress? Is there a point to it all? This center is not spelled out. We have to try and find it. Now, I could say much about why this is the way of thinking in postmodern literature. It has to do with the modern way of seeing life. It has to do with the way we live nowadays. The old certainties are gone. The old fixed beliefs in religions, in ideologies, in structures, family structures, they're not so fixed anymore. Even in this novel, we see that the family situation is complicated. So even that is complicated. Now, still we need some kind of center, some kind of anchor in life. And the thing is, we have to find it. You read a story and you have to think about the unifying theme, the meaning. All right. This unifying theme, this insight, depends on the eyes that see. And it is like that in all things in life, really. People see things differently. One situation can be seen 10 different ways. That's how it is. Reading literature is the same. It depends a lot on the eyes that read and see. That doesn't mean that every reading, every interpretation is correct. There can be different ways of seeing a relationship or a situation, different ways that are true at the same time, but not anything can be said, right? So not all readings, not all analyses are true, but not all true readings are the same. And the same goes for reading a novel. You can emphasize different things. You can have different angles on it. And you may end up with differing conclusions. and that is based on you as a reader. Yes. Let's see how we can keep this going. So reading will teach you to observe. It will aid you in your search for meaning. What's the point of it all? And it will help you feel. Because as you read, hopefully, if you're really imagining the story, you're also feeling. Sometimes you like the characters, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you're carried away. Anger, fear, excitement, love, sympathy, etc. These feelings, they're meant to fill you and carry you away. Why? Because one should feel. One should get carried away sometimes. That's life, that's the blooming of life, that's meant to happen, it has to happen. Art can do that, if you let it, and reading can do that. You just need to find something that speaks to you. So, if you didn't find that this book speaks to you, read another book and find that being carried away. The same is taking place in paintings, in music, etc. All art has that capability of touching that which is human and touching you in a new way that you didn't know that you were capable of being touched in. Now let's go to another world. Here we see a family with different characters, and we can perhaps not see ourselves in these characters and in the sibling rivalry, because that's one of the central themes. We have Miranda versus Gareth, and then we have little Jasper caught in the middle, and we know that in the family that used to inhabit the house in which they live, that old family from 100 years ago, which I can't remember the name of. Anyway, that old family, Kearnshaw. In that family there was also sibling rivalry, and there were two siblings that killed their younger brother as well. And then we have the rivalry between Geordie and Harry. Geordie, the great-granddad, the granddad of Nick and the great-granddad of Miranda, veteran from World War One, and he ended up, it seems, killing his own brother. So Geordie killed Harry because, why? Because everyone loved Harry more than they loved Geordie. Especially the mother liked Harry. Now, so this situation of jealousy and rivalry is very human, something many people can relate to. And we as readers, even if perhaps we can't, perhaps in our family that's not the case like that, well, we can still be touched and carried away and really imagine this situation. And we may dislike Gareth. Gareth, he's this nasty kid, like we saw in one of the previous videos. But as the story goes on, we find out that Gareth, there's more to it than him being nasty. And yes, he is nasty, running his stepdad's toothbrush around in the toilet, doing that like every day. I think he does. That's incredibly nasty, but we have to understand, and we come to understand, that he's a very vulnerable boy that is being himself mistreated by other kids, and we get a sense of the feeling of hurt that he has, the lack of a real father. These are real situations, we have to understand them. it's a simplistic approach that says Gareth is stupid. I don't like stupid. I don't like stupid. I don't like Gareth. I don't like this. Close the book, move on. Well, okay, but that's not very. What do you learn from that? We can all agree on that. What about the day you find out that you are Gareth? What about that? That's what Geordie has to deal with. The fact that he finds out he knows that he's done something awful. It seems that he's killed Harry. We're not quite sure if he remembers correctly, but that doesn't really matter in this for this theme. The theme here is that Gareth has another side. Gareth has a story at least, and Gareth, it's possible that he could develop, he could change. Now, that's the idea of things not being so simple. Things have many aspects, and we as readers also find out that our simplistic approach needs to be corrected. Geordie, unlike Gareth, we like him as readers. From the outset, he's so likable, he's so nice, and he's fascinating. He's got this story, and he's been interviewed by Helen, the historian, and then we find out that all is not gold that glitters. All that, rather, we find out that he's a complicated character. So again, it turns out that he has a dark side. So this is an insight always to remember. This leads us on to our search toward the center of the novel. This insight. Things are complicated. Nobody is simply good, simply bad. Can we forgive them? Is it possible to forgive Geordie for killing his brother? For feeling bad, having hatred toward Harry? Is it possible? Well, that is really the question. Is it possible to forgive ourselves? Because if we can forgive Gareth, maybe we can forgive ourselves when we find out that we have some of these bad character traits. Geordie has killed his brother. He's got the guilt to deal with. So dislike of others and guilt toward yourself, those are intimately connected. The more the dislike toward others, the stronger the feeling of guilt toward yourself. And this is a possible reading to say that the insight going on here is to recognize the bad with the good, and to accept it, to face it, forgive it, and move on. Well, that's such a simplistic way of expressing it, and that takes away the true complicated fullness of this, and that's why you have to write a whole book about it, because it's easy to say forgive or whatever, or forget your own guilt. You can't. Geordie cannot. It's with him forever. Nevertheless, actually that's another theme. Is it possible to move on, or is it not? And there the reader comes in. I as a reader would say yes, and that has to do with the worldview you hold. Remember the development that we as readers go through. We move from confusion, this family, whatever is going on, they're all struggling, to more specific idea of the themes. the themes of the history that keeps following them, and we'll come back to that, and the theme of this theme of forgiveness, or you know, dealing with the evil with the good. We develop as readers. We get clearer conception as we go through our search, and we also get a more complicated view of the characters. So Gareth is no longer just this nasty kid. We get a fuller picture. That's the idea really of life in itself, is to become wiser. Literature can do that. We grow up as we read. We move on to a fuller view of life. Instead of the innocent, idealistic, simplistic perspectives, we get a fuller, more complicated view, maybe more true view of life. And this helps us deal with life as it really is. Because if we have the simple, only this naive view, what are we going to do when we find ourselves to be Geordie that did that to Harry? How are we going to deal with that? We're just going to commit suicide, like Miranda. She's almost committing suicide because she's got no hope. Well, perhaps an approach is to get this fuller view and this ability to forgive. Maybe that's what can rescue Miranda and Geordie. Now, the view I'm putting here is to say that the story can help. The story can give you something. It can give you the thought of forgiveness. Well, that's something I'm reading into it to some extent. Another reading is to say this story gives a picture of it. It gives us understanding. We feel with Miranda, and if we never felt those thoughts, now we meet a person like Miranda who feels them, and so we begin to sympathize with her. Alright, so we move beyond our little shell of my life, my little life, and suddenly we can see there are other kinds of people. Right, and we move beyond time as well. Nick, who has a granddad who lived and fought in First World War, suddenly we're moving beyond our own little small world in the present, and we're seeing a century back through Geordie. Now, then it is that in itself is a point and a reason to experience through reading and a point in this novel. So not just the redemptive approach, the approach that says how can we get through it in one piece, that's kind of redemption. How can we redeem the bad? But also just how can we see things as they are, face it as it is. The theme of evil and good being complicated is also seen and developed in that the truth about these things is unclear. It's unclear. The truth is unclear. Did or didn't he kill Harry? We don't know. Did he just make it up in his evil memory? His memory maybe told him, you did it. You felt those bad feelings. But why? Because he feels this sense of guilt for surviving. Maybe he didn't even do that, and his memory is putting it out there. You know, there's a TV series on Netflix that they talked about recently is about Jews in America who have this feeling of guilt for surviving Second World War. And that's a very real thing. You feel guilt for surviving. It's a human thing. Now, the truth, where's the truth? We don't know. What really happened? Didn't he kill Harry? What about Miranda and Gareth? Did Miranda watch Gareth or didn't she? She didn't. She didn't remember her doing it. But then on the other hand, we know that she's sleepwalking at some point. So sometimes she does things that she doesn't remember. But on the other hand, it seems that Gareth sometimes sees people that aren't there. And he thinks he saw her watch him throw stones at Jasper from the cliff on the beach. And the truth is unclear. Now the point here is not that there is no truth. Well, there is obviously a truth to these matters. Truth does exist, but often we don't know. We are not in a position to know, and that is the reality in life and in this story. And you have to deal with the situation even though you don't know it. If you don't know the facts, you still gotta live. There is a fact, there is a truth somewhere, but you don't know it. Now, this is the theme of things not being clear. You have to live with that. Nick himself just cheated on his wife with Helen. So why should he judge Geordie? Well, he does that after he realizes what Geordie's done. My point is, we might as well not judge since we don't know. Or there are so many things we don't know. We might as well not judge. Pass through life without judging. Gareth, Nick, Gareth's mother, she's always worrying so much, and the reader can get irritated at her for being that way, you know. Or at least I do, but that's my reaction as a reader. The reader may as well not judge, because well, it turns out that not only is Gareth an asshole, and I think his mother is a little bit not very nice either, for various reasons. Geordie was not very nice, and then Nick, he's not perfect either, is he? So if you can live with yourself having faults, they all clearly have, then why not accept that others have it as well? On the other hand, if you realize that other people have faults and you accept that the world is a faulty place, people are not perfect, well then perhaps you're more likely to forgive yourself and move on. Maybe that's an insight from the novel. Maybe that's a point. The world is not perfect, life is not perfect. If you thought it was, it isn't. And now we can forgive ourselves for being part of this world. Now, it doesn't, of course, we don't want to take this reading too far, because you don't want to not take responsibility and just give up. Maybe that's what Nick does at the end. It's like, alright, Geordie, my great-granddad just died and I'm so sorry. And it turns out he killed his brother, and I've seen all these nasty things that happened, and okay, let's just go and have sex with Helen and not tell my wife. or girlfriend. Of course, it's not to be encouraged, and that way of acting, but it can be understood at least. And so the reading should not be taken too far. That would be fatalism, and that is, and I'm saying that I don't like that reading. Well, you may take that, pursue that line of analysis, but I don't think so. And of course, here we come to the reader, um, and your what your perception of reconciling and making meaning in this situation. So, what is the point in this story? Ultimately, it will come back to what you believe about life in general. I think what you all already hold as something that this is true, or this is good, and this is how I like to see life, or this is how I do see life. Well, that's gonna hugely affect how you experience a novel. So if you've given up, if you for various reasons think life is meaningless, you have cynical approaches to things, then well, maybe when you read the novel you'll think they're all assholes, and that's just it. And that's a sad reading, I think, and I think that's to be avoided, because well, because that's don't mean like life is meaningless. So, do you really believe that? But that's why we become philosophers as we read. Literary analysis moves into philosophy as well. Like these all touch, like in the Renaissance, they believed the Renaissance man had to be the man who did everything. He did math, he did philosophy, he did theology, he did medicine, he did history, geometry, everything, literature, languages, ancient languages, etc., poetry. They all did it. These so you get this wholesome approach. So the arts and the disciplines, they touch on each other. Literature moves into philosophy. Now, so this is a general life wisdom I'm reaching through reading it. And we all, of course, find out one day these things that, that nobody is perfect. We're not perfect. They're not perfect. Why not accept it? Why not forgive? Why not move on? But reading a book, of course, can help you get that insight soon, and it can help you in life in general. I think that's one reason to read. It gives you a lot of many of these insights, and of course it leads us to the question: can we learn from our mistakes? Because all these people make mistakes. Do they learn from them? Can you learn from your mistakes? Can you move on? Can you what about huge mistakes? Now Geordie clearly realized that the First World War was a huge mistake, and so he went around as a retired man, telling people to avoid another world war. This is around the end of the Cold War, so it was very close that we had another awful war, which thankfully we didn't. And so he's learned something, the awfulness of war, because that's the situations where you can end up in situations where you might even kill your brother. And he feels sorry, so he's also capable of repentance. On the other hand, these things keep following him, and he's got nightmares as an old man, and he he feels himself to be in hell. At the end, he says, "I'm in hell," and Nick explains that, reads that as him saying that that he's got an internal hell in these all these feelings of guilt he's got. So some things can stay with you for a whole lifetime. So this gives understanding, to understand maybe other people. Maybe just be careful yourself. Careful you don't kill your brother, because not just because it's bad, but because it's going to follow you for the rest of your life if you do. Well, that's a simple insight. See how bad he felt at the end, so don't go and do what he did. Well, on the other hand, be able to forgive yourself, but just remember that some things that they can keep following you. That's not a very nice thought. Some things from the past pop up in the present, like the house with that family, Earnshaw. That was it, I think, Earnshaw. That family, they had 2 kids that killed their younger sibling, and now somehow that house is there. This haunted location is where this family with Gareth and Miranda is living in, and they are nearly killing their younger brother. It's spooky. It's really, really spooky. So things from the past and locations where things happened in the past seem to have some power in the present. Things that happened in your family a long time ago can stay there. This is an underlying theme. The theme of history. The theme of history not just being history. When you close the history books, it's all over. No, history being here, now. And not just like theoretically in the newspapers and history books, but it's real in your life, because what happened in the war created some psychological wounds that are still there. It's there in Geordie, and perhaps in some way is still affecting Nick and his children. So this is another important theme. So the theme of evil is something that can be overcome by forgiveness, by acceptance, but also being a very powerful presence. The good and the bad from the past keep affecting, can be hard to avoid. And here we're back to this question in your reading: how fatalistic do you want to be? And I think avoid the total fatalistic reading. That's boring. That's awful, really. Don't be a fatalist in life, nor in literature. But some are actually. Yeah, there are some that read literature and would say, well, this shows ultimately despair at the end. It's all despair. I don't think that goes for this, and of course part of it is already preconceived notions, but it's also in the novel. If you think about how Nick and Helen, they create a better ending for Geordie than the one we read. So we read him ending on this sad note, him saying, "I'm in hell." But Nick and Helen, they emphasize the fact that you are in a feeling of despair at the very end, when you're 90 something, 101 is he, doesn't take away from all the years in between where you loved and where you fought to move on, and where you changed yourself. You see, that means the simple despair reading doesn't hold for this novel. It has a more positive flow at the end for the family as well. There you see it. We have a few pages where we are told how it all kind of moves on, and then Gareth grows up, and etc. etc. He goes to his grandparents, and well, it gives the idea that yes, history does move on, and it's not all doom and gloom. We are agents. We can choose, which is what Geordie does afterwards. It takes him years. He can't talk about his awful experiences because everyone expects him to be the hero and to love what the Brits did in the war, and just be this strong guy. That's what they all expected, but he doesn't feel that way, but he can't say it. Only much later are people interested. And much later does Helen come along. And this shows us that we are agents to change, which he does eventually. And we do need other people. Helen comes in as a redeeming factor for Geordie. We do need other people. Imagine Gareth just left to himself. But he does need other people. He needs his mother. He needs a father. And that's when Nick has the opportunity to be a father. And his mother's obviously got to let Nick be that father. That's necessary for Gareth to move on. And Gareth, as we see at the end, does move on. He stops doing the toothbrush thing. Well, that's moving on. He stops doing the nasty things. So he's an agent that can change. And he needs other people to help him. This is a wholesome reading, and it's actually exactly the right reading as I see it. But some things can't be changed, or they will still be, even though you change, it will still be there in some way, and you still have to accept some level of hurt or pain, some things from the past. You can't change the past, you can only change your own attitude and move in a better direction, but sometimes the pain can stay there. And for some people it can be very strong, and which it is for Geordie, and we have to understand that, and that's important for understanding other people, understanding yourself, perhaps understanding that war is something not to be taken lightly. You know, First World War was a real tragedy. It was real people. So these are some approaches to the reading of this novel. Remember the many different characters, different locations, this big picture, and then you have these themes gradually emerging. The theme of forgiving yourself, forgiving other people, dealing with all this evil in the world. What do you do about it? How can you move on? How can Gareth move on? And how do you as a reader react to all this? Because ultimately the novel is about you as a reader. Like the painting on that wall, and Miranda says, "This is us." They see a painting on the wall of a family, and then she says, "This is us," because it's them. But ultimately, the novel is that painting, and we the readers, we're the ones who can say, "This is us." And that's what makes great literature, is when you can say that.